The night sky was alive with danger, anti-aircraft fire tearing through the darkness, tracer rounds clawing at the heavens. The SEALs on the ground had said it couldn't be done. The valley was too narrow, the radar too sharp, the enemy too ruthless. And yet, against every warning, one pilot pulled her aircraft lower, closer, daring gravity and death itself. What drove her to take that impossible flight? And how did she change the course of the mission and military history forever? The operation had already been classified as high risk. Deep inside enemy territory, U.S. Navy SEALs were pinned down, surrounded by hostile forces, and cut off from extraction. The rugged terrain, a valley flanked by steep cliffs, thick forests, and enemy observation posts, made air support nearly impossible. In the command tent, tension was palpable. Maps were spread across tables, radio chatter cut through the silence, and every plan was met with the same grim response from the SEALs: it can't be done. The problem wasn't a lack of firepower, it was geography. The valley was too narrow for a safe approach. Enemy radar and anti-aircraft weapons covered the airspace like an iron net. Any aircraft flying at standard altitude would be spotted and destroyed in seconds. But flying higher wasn't an option either. The SEALs needed precision support, and any delay meant they'd be overrun. That's when someone suggested an idea so radical it sounded suicidal: flying lower than anyone had ever attempted before, skimming treetop level, hugging the terrain, and racing into the valley before the enemy could lock on. The SEALs shook their heads. Even seasoned operators, men trained to attempt the impossible, dismissed it outright. "That's not flying," one of them muttered. "That's suicide." But word spread quickly. There was one pilot who might just try it. Her name wasn't spoken loudly, not yet, but everyone in the room knew who she was. She had a reputation, fearless, relentless, with a talent for precision flying that bordered on instinct. Yet even so, this wasn't just a difficult maneuver, this was a death wish. The mission brief ended with silence. Nobody volunteered. Nobody raised their hand. The SEALs prepared for the worst, bracing themselves for the possibility that help wouldn't come. And then, in a quiet but steady voice, she broke the silence: "I'll fly it." The room froze. Heads turned. Some laughed nervously, assuming she was joking. But her expression didn't change. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't bluffing. She looked at the maps again, traced the valley with her finger, and said it again, firmer this time: "I'll fly it. I'll go lower than anyone's ever gone." For a moment, the SEALs didn't know how to respond. Was this bravery? Recklessness? Insanity? But as she walked out to prepare her aircraft, one thing was certain: if anyone was going to attempt the impossible, it was her. The clock was ticking. The SEALs had hours, maybe minutes, before enemy forces closed in. Somewhere above them, the sound of engines would soon cut through the night. And for the first time that day, they began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, survival was possible. Every pilot has a story, but hers was different. Long before she ever strapped into a cockpit, she had been told what she couldn't do. Too small. Too young. Too ambitious. The Military Flight Academy had seen her as a statistical outlier, someone unlikely to pass the punishing demands of survival training, advanced aerodynamics, and combat drills. But she didn't just pass. She excelled. Her instructors quickly learned that she had an almost unnatural gift for flying at the edge of possibility. While others played it safe, she seemed to seek the razor's edge, flying closer to the ground, banking harder, threading through obstacles with precision that left even veterans stunned. What unnerved them wasn't her daring, but her control. She wasn't reckless. She was calculating. She knew exactly how far she could push both machine and body, and she thrived in the space where most pilots panicked. By the time she earned her wings, her reputation had already spread. She flies where others won't. But skill wasn't the whole story. What truly set her apart was resolve. Flying for her wasn't about adrenaline. It was about responsibility. She had lost someone close during a mission years earlier, when support came too late, when aircraft circled too high and too safe. That wound never closed. Every time she stepped into a cockpit, she carried it with her, a silent vow that no one under her watch would be abandoned. That vow was about to be tested. When she walked into the hangar that night, mechanics paused. They knew the mission on the table. They knew the odds. Nobody spoke as she moved with quiet confidence, checking her gear, inspecting her bird. This wasn't just another sortie. This was the kind of mission pilots whispered about for years afterward. Her aircraft gleamed under the harsh lights, its body stripped of unnecessary weight, weapons calibrated for precision, and systems checked twice over. She moved through the pre-flight routine with mechanical precision, but inside her chest, her heart pounded a different rhythm, not fear, but anticipation. A fellow pilot approached her, shaking his head. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "Nobody would blame you." She looked at him, calm but unwavering. Somebody has to. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't ego. It was duty. When she finally strapped into the cockpit, the world outside faded. The walls of the hangar, the anxious voices, the doubts of the SEALs, all of it disappeared. In their place was a familiar silence, the kind she always felt before takeoff. A silence that meant possibility. The engines roared to life, vibrating through her bones. She pulled her helmet tight, eyes fixed ahead. This wasn't about whether it was possible. For her, there was no question. The only question was how close she could skim the earth before it reached up to take her. She pushed the throttle. The bird rolled forward. And somewhere in the dark valley below, men were praying for a miracle. She intended to be it. The valley looked like a death trap from above. On her radar, the jagged terrain rose like teeth, with anti-aircraft emplacements scattered across the ridges. The SEALs below had gone dark, conserving batteries, hiding their position. She knew they were watching, waiting, hoping against their own doubts that she'd somehow arrive. She dropped altitude. Hard. At first, the aircraft shuddered with turbulence as it cut through the thin mountain air. Warnings flashed on her console. Terrain proximity. Terrain proximity. But she ignored them. Every pilot was trained to trust their instruments. She trusted her instincts more. The treetops blurred just beneath her wings. Her altitude gauge dipped lower than it ever had in combat. She could see the shadow of her aircraft racing along the ground, a dark streak against the moonlit valley floor. Enemy radar swept across the sky, but she was already beneath it. Too low, too fast. By the time they realized where she was, she'd already be gone. Then the traces began. Bright red arcs of fire stitched the air ahead, crisscrossing in deadly webs. The cliffs spat gunfire, the valley echoing like thunder. Every second was a gamble. A fraction too high, and she'd be shredded. A fraction too low, and she'd carve into the earth. Inside the cockpit, her hands moved with fluid certainty. A dip to the left. A surge of throttle. A snap roll so tight it felt like the wings might shear off. Her breathing was steady, her focus absolute. Down below, the SEALs lifted their heads. For a moment, disbelief froze them. They had said it couldn't be done, that no pilot would dare. And yet here she was, roaring through the valley like a phantom, lower than the treetops, skimming the riverbed, dodging fire as if gravity itself had surrendered to her will. The first strike hit its mark. Precision-guided munitions cut through an enemy emplacement on the ridge, silencing a gun nest that had been pinning the SEALs for hours. She banked hard, swung around, and lined up the next, each pass surgical, each escape by inches. The SEALs cheered between bursts of gunfire. Their radios crackled with renewed energy. For the first time that night, they believed survival was possible. But in the cockpit, she wasn't thinking of glory. She wasn't thinking of proving anyone wrong. She was thinking of the men on the ground, the ones who needed her to be perfect. One final maneuver brought her so low her landing gear nearly clipped the water. Enemy fire blazed overhead, searching, too slow to catch her. She released her last strike, a clean hit that tore apart the final anti-aircraft gun threatening the valley. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, silence fell. The valley was still. The SEALs were alive. She pulled back on the stick, climbing for the first time that night. Her aircraft clawed upward, breaking free of the trap. Behind her, the valley smoldered. Ahead of her, the horizon opened wide. For the SEALs, it was a miracle. For her, it was simply the fulfillment of a vow: never leave anyone behind. The impossible had just been done.